I woke up to the sound of something heavy landing outside. My tent, the ground shook slightly, and when I opened my eyes, the air smelled like roasted flesh and wild herbs. I crawled out from under the thin thermal blanket and found her standing there towering over me in the pale blue dawn, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, and her long fangs glinting as she smiled in that way that made my heartbeat quicken in both fear and something I still could not name. She held in her clawed hands a slab of sizzling meat, still dripping juices onto the dirt, and without a word she shoved it toward me. This was the third morning in a row she had done this. The first time I thought it was a gift, maybe a thank you for saving her from the quicksand pits on the edge of the Red Plains. The second time I thought maybe she was just being hospitable, but the third time I noticed the way she stared at me as I hesitated before eating her, offering her ears twitched backward, her lips curled slightly, and a low growl rumbled from her throat until I finally took a bite. The meat was surprisingly tender with a smoky flavor that told me she had slow roasted it over the coals all night. She watched me chew as if my survival depended on her watching, as if every bite I took meant something to her, something deep and instinctive, something primal. She was a Beastwoman from the Koresh clans, a race of towering feline, like warriors with a code older than most stars. Her name was Thrain, and when I first met her, she had been a prisoner of slavers locked in an iron cage on the back of a desert skimmer. I had blown open the cage during the chaos of my escape, and she had ripped apart the man who kept her without hesitation. Since then, she had followed me everywhere without ever asking permission. That morning, as I chewed the last bite, she gave a satisfied huff and crouched beside me, her long tail flicking against my leg, as she began cleaning the bone with her teeth. "You're eating enough now," she said in her deep, accented voice. "I will bring more tonight." My body froze. More tonight. She was planning ahead. I tried to tell her she did not have to keep feeding me, that I could hunt for myself, but she just stared at me with those glowing eyes and said, "No mate must ever go hungry." Mate, the word hit me harder than the food that I told her I was not her mate. But she only tilted her head as if I had said something amusing. She stood to her full height, blocking the rising sun, and said, "You save me, you feed beside me, you sleep near my fire, you are mine." She said it like a fact, not a claim. That day we traveled to the Thorn Valleys, the air hot and buzzed with insects. She carried most of the gear, without complaint despite my protests. Every time I tried to take something from her, she made a sound between a growl and a laugh. I began to notice how she always kept herself between me and the cliffs or the caves, how she constantly scanned for predators or raiders, and every so often she would disappear into the brush and return with more meat. Sometimes cooked, sometimes raw, which she insisted I eat immediately. On the fourth night, we camped under the glow of the twin moon. She sat across from me, tearing into a roasted creature, whose name I did not know, watching me as I ate my portion. When I slowed down, she narrowed her eyes and let out a warning rumble. "Eat," she commanded. I told her I was full. She leaned forward, her tail curling around my ankle, and repeated, "Eat." Her voice was low and almost dangerous. I took another bite. I started to realize the meat was more than food to her. It was a ritual, maybe even a bonding act in her culture. Each piece she brought me was her way of claiming me, of making sure I survived long enough to stay by her side. I overheard her one night speaking her own language to the fire, saying something that sounded like, "I will not lose him like the others." The next day, we ran into trouble. Raiders from the northern hills ambushed us, their hover bikes kicking up clouds of red dust. Thrain roared and leapt into the fight, her claws flashing, her fangs sinking into armor as if it were cloth. I fought with my blaster, but mostly tried not to get caught in her swings. When it was over, the ground was littered with broken metal and bodies. She stood in the middle of it, all blood streaking her, for chest heaving, and when her eyes found me, she dropped the half dead raider she was holding and rushed over to check if I was hurt. She pressed her forehead against mine and growled softly, a sound that now felt almost comforting. Then she pulled a hunk of still warm meat from her pouch and shoved it into my hands. "Eat," she demanded. I did without hesitation, and this time she purred. By the seventh day, I stopped fighting it. When she brought me a strip of smoked flesh from some beast I could not name, I ate it. Without question, she would smile in that slow way, and her ears would relax. I began to notice that the growls had softened, that she no longer looked at me like a stranger. She still called me mate, and I still told myself it was just her way, but somewhere deep down I wondered if maybe I had already accepted it. The night before we reached the spaceport, we sat together by the fire. She leaned back on her arms, looking up at the stars. I asked her what she would do when we got there. She said, "I will follow you until you cannot walk anymore, then I will carry you." I laughed, but she did not. She reached over, brushed a claw gently along my jaw, and said, "Eat well tomorrow. May it will be a long journey." And in that moment, I knew that no matter where I went, she would be there, meat in hand, growl, ready just in case I ever forgot that in her world I was already hers.